As you acquire camping equipment, start with the necessities before you decide if camping is for you. You can borrow equipment, you can buy inexpensive used equipment on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, or look at it for a neighborhood garage sale to purchase some inexpensive equipment. If you enjoy camping, then develop an equipment plan and then begin to purchase what fits within your budget. Prioritize the order of what you want to buy by importance and then execute the plan over a number of trips. If you begin with tent camping, then the size and the weight of your equipment is not as important as if you begin with backpacking, where size and weight are of a much higher level of importance. When a product is available on Amazon, I like to go there and read their descriptions and then compare them to the manufacturer's website and the descriptions that they have there. Unfortunately, frequently I see discrepancies between the two sites, and I'll tend to go with what the manufacturer is saying and then just assume that the translation to Amazon didn't happen correctly. Also, be skeptical of marketing statements that may not be 100% accurate. For instance, whether or not it's a four-season tent. Look at what other experts are saying on review sites for that particular product so that you get third-party verification that things are exactly as the manufacturer is saying. On the positive, I've seen dramatic improvement with camping equipment manufacturers with respect to innovations, competitive pricing, and expanded offerings. So that's just been great. On the negative side, I still think manufacturers have quite a ways to go on being really good at describing their products accurately with the different technical specs. And then, especially for equipment that's a little more complex to put together, like tents, for instance, oftentimes, if there's any instructions on assembly, they're usually pretty poor. When I find an item that I want to buy, my usual strategy, especially if I'm not in a rush to get it, is to actually press the button to make a purchase. And then when you go into your shopping cart, there's a place where you can save it for later. And I like to do that because you get notifications when the price changes. So I can leave a number of products that I've selected over time in that save for later section. And then Amazon notifies me when there's a sale on the item, and that helps for me to trigger when I want to make that purchase. There are also hundreds of specialty camping and outdoor stores that don't offer their products through Amazon, but they're certainly worth taking a look at. So I'll frequently go to those sites as well. Frequently they'll have a discount for a first-time buyer. Typically it's 10%, but you do have to balance that with the fact that most of these online suppliers do charge for shipping unless you get your purchase up to a certain level. Then there are local camping stores you can go to, REI, Bass Pro Shops, various camping specialty stores in your area. And I highly recommend taking the time to go into some of those stores. And the big advantage is you can see things in person. You can put your hands on them. If there's tents there, you can stick your head in and kind of check out features of the different tents that they have. And I think the best one is to actually sit in camping chairs, different brands of camping chairs. See what style of chair is comfortable for you. I think clothing is also worth a strong consideration at local stores, because of course you could try it on. Same thing with camping shoes, rather than taking a guess when you're ordering it online, at least until you know that the manufacturer and can repeat and have the size correct with them. Look for seasonal sales. I updated a lot of equipment back last December. A lot of companies have sales during that time. I think I probably saved 20 to 40% on average during that special period. Camping is popular all over the world, and a number of areas like Asia, Europe, many other regions have some really unique product offerings that have styles and tastes that are different than what you might see normally available in the United States. Just to give a few examples, in Asia, they have a setup called an IGT kitchen system. IGT standing for Integrated Grill Table. And it's very popular in a lot of the Asian countries to actually sit almost in a cockpit with a table where you prep and you cook and then you eat all in the same location while you're sitting comfortably in your chair. It's pretty interesting. In Europe, they specialize, well, in many things, but just to give a couple of examples, I think there's a lot of really nice clothing offerings that have very durable camping clothing. In some of the Scandinavian countries, you'll see tents and sleeping bags and things that specialize in colder weather. So there's just a few of the examples that you run into. So when you do make purchases, whether it's new or used equipment, I recommend that you test it out before you take it on the trip. You don't want to get all the way out in a remote location and discover there are parts missing, or that neighbor's tent that you borrowed doesn't have tent stakes or poles. So you want to check it out and make sure that everything is there and that you know how to put it together before you get out to the site so that it's not a first time experience. Also, consider whether you are the kind of person that really likes logistics and you're fine with having a lot of equipment and you're planning to get it all in the car and get it out and get it set up, and you love the comfort with the amount of equipment that you brought on the trip? Or are you the kind of person that's much more of a necessity style person who wants a quick setup, and of course then you're going to spend less money, you have less to pack, you have less to tear down and bring back to your home each day, and less to store in your garage. So you'll have to think about whether you're one of those two people or a blend of the two. Okay, now let's move into specific equipment, and I'm going to be showing you my equipment as we go through the different types of equipment in the upcoming episodes. I just want to say that I purchased all of this equipment on my own. I have no relationships with any manufacturers, and I just really want to go through and highlight things so that you have an idea of the factors that you need to consider when you make your purchases. My general philosophy is to select equipment that's good quality at a fair price. I've had a long career in sales and marketing, and over the years I guess I've learned that name brand companies are worth taking a look at, because to have gotten to that point they have to have had good quality products and also good customer service. But you still have to take a close look at the company's products, because sometimes that falters over time. Management changes, things happen with companies, and then they're coasting along on their reputation. I put much more emphasis on looking at reviews from customers that have purchased the products and to hear about their experiences. I'm amazed at the products that I run across that are non-name brand, but they're probably 85-90% of the way there in terms of the product features they offer compared to the name brand version, and yet they're probably 25% of the price. So I think that's certainly worth taking a look at if all of the reviews are checking out, because if you're spending a lot less money on products, you can start to execute your priority plan a lot faster with new equipment. Lastly, I look for products that can be multitasked, like for instance, a side table that can be next to your camping chair during the day to put a drink on. And then that table can be relocated into your tent in the evening as a side table next to you while you're sleeping that has your valuables on it. Or it could be a table that's used to put a small heater on that keeps it safe and secure while it's directing heat to you. Your tent may be the single most important decision that you'll make from a cost perspective, but also it's your refuge for sleeping at night and your protection against poor weather. I'm going to set up my tent to show you a typical process, and I'll make comments as I go. I previously picked out a spot in this campsite for where I'm going to locate the tent, but I'm not going to go into detail on that here in this episode. Let's save that for a later one. My tent is the base of it is about 8.5 by 7.5 feet. So it's a decent mid-sized tent. You can certainly buy them bigger and you can buy them a lot smaller. The tent, when it's all packaged up and in my vehicle, and it weighs 30 pounds. And in this case, I had to carry the tent 30 feet. It's not a problem for me, but if you're maybe a little bit older or you lack the strength to carry a heavy item, what I would do is, while you have it in your trunk area or the back of the hatch, just unzip it and bring it out individual components so that you can really bring the weight down. I would say the only other really heavy thing that you might have to deal with is your cooler. Some people get like a pull cart sort of a thing. You see those oftentimes at sports games with the family, or even a dolly hole. The first component to talk about is what's called the ground cloth. The ground cloth is actually a surface, similar material to the tent, because I bought the ground cloth with my tent, and its purpose is twofold. Number one, if the ground gets wet, if it rains and water starts to track under your tent, it'll go under the ground cloth, and so there's no risk of that moisture getting up into the floor of your tent. The second reason to have one is there can be little pebbles, and you might miss finding a little twig or something that's underneath your tent, and you don't want that to puncture the bottom of your tent. So the ground cloth gives you a layer of protection for your tent. You don't have to buy a ground cloth that's the exact size of your tent. If you want to save some money, you could just go over like to a Walmart or place. I've seen pretty good size heavy tarps for like 15-20 bucks there. Then if you're going to end up buying multiple tents and you're going to use them at different times, sometimes you can use that one tarp for multiple tents. But if you want to have that exact size, then they're usually available when you buy the tent. The one that I have is cut to the right size. It also has loops on the corners. So when I bring the tent out and I stake it down at the four corners, I also use that loop, the ground cloth, to bring the stake through. And then that way the ground cloth stays completely immovable. Now, if you do have a bigger one, and likely it's going to stick out around the tent in different places, I recommend that you fold it to get it under the tent, because if it does rain, you don't want water to land on the ground cloth and then track its way under your tent. I've heard some people say it's better to fold it up. I've heard others say fold it down because, you don't want to create a bathtub with your ground cloth. I don't know. I don't think it makes a huge difference one way or the other, unless there's high wind pushing rain sideways under your tent. I think that's a real low risk thing, but I'd be curious to hear if any of you have had experience and do prefer it one way or the other. So if you have some experience in that, please feel free to leave a comment about it. And the other thing is, if you have an oversized tarp and it's definitely not going to rain on your trip, you could extend it out in front of the tent, and then it becomes kind of a doormat where you can put equipment on it or your shoes so that they're not right on the ground. So this tent has two main components beyond the ground cloth. There's an inner tent, and I'll be showing you that in detail. And then there's a rain tarp that goes over the top. And then this tent has an additional thing, which I think is really nice, and it's like a built-in tarp. Now, the tarp does unzip in two different places, so you can do different configurations. If you really want to seal in the tarp, you wouldn't use this, but you'd let it roll down, and then it zips down on both sides so that the tent is completely enclosed in inclement weather. Now, the inner tent, and I think maybe you can see it here, has poles that go up from each corner, and then there's what's pole that goes across all the way, and that's called a ridge line. And the poles for this tent are steel, which I think is a good strength for a larger tent like this. You also frequently with tents, you'll see aluminum poles. That's probably a smaller one. They're a little bit lighter. And then sometimes you still see fiberglass, which are very narrow, and those will flex. And typically, again, that's for a smaller tent. The reason the poles are outside of the inner tent is that creates a little more space for you inside the tent. And that's kind of the standard nowadays. As I mentioned, after you've got the ground cloth down and then you put the inner tent up by extending out the poles, then you stake this one down in the corners, both the ground cloth and the inner tent. And there's loops there to do that. I recommend not just going around one at a time in a circle. I would pick a corner, then go across the angle to the opposite corner, put that one in next. You want to pull it out so that there's some tightness along the tent floor and the ground cloth there for that. And then from there, you can do the other two one at a time. But when you do those two, you can pull and get kind of equal pressure or stretch going out to the two corners. I think that's the best way to make the tent completely square and completely taut all the way around. This tent has window flaps on the outside. They zip down. I've already unzipped them. But I like to, during the day, fold these things up and create ventilation into the tent so that it doesn't get stuffy in there during the day. So it has little connections here for you to do on both sides. And I won't record all of these, but there's one in the back and there's one on each side. And then there's also on the inside, you can flap it all the way up. There's a fabric there, but you can also bring that fabric down. And then it just creates a nice mesh window so that breezes can go through the tent during the day. When it comes to tent materials, I think the three most popular types are nylon, polyester, which is sometimes called Oxford cloth, and canvas. And I think back in the day when tenting was first popular and before it got much more modern with different offerings, canvas was much more typical. But some people love a canvas tent. It has a nice heaviness to it, but there is some maintenance involved with it. Nylon is very strong, very light. With a larger tent like this one is polyester or Oxford cloth, but it's a strong material too, and it's for a tent this size. Now, when you're looking at different tents and you're going through the description either on the manufacturer's website or maybe on Amazon, you'll see two numbers typically associated with tent material. One is, for example, this tent, the side material is 210D, and the D stands for denier, and it's a measurement of the density of the fabric. So the higher the number, the better. The other number is which stands for millimeters. And typically on tents, you might see, oh, it's 2,000 millimeters, 3,000 millimeters. Those are probably the two most popular levels. And what that is when I guess there's an organization that does testing or independent testing, but basically there's some kind of a tube that's marked off in millimeters. And what they do is they fill it with water, and then down in the bottom of the tube, it's open, and they put fabric of whatever tent they're testing across that opening. And then the water, as it gets higher up, it's building pressure, pushing down on the fabric. And from what I read, it's like when like 3 drops come out at the bottom, then they say, okay, that's the point. And then they measure that and, oh, okay, it's 2,000 millimeters or whatever. So again, the higher number, the more water pressure it will withstand. And of course, that's coming from rain, or it also could be high winds and rain that are causing pressure there for that. So, you want to take a look at that. And I guess if you're making a comparison between two tents and they're similar in price, maybe go for the higher number. Another factor to consider with your tent, and again, you can learn this from watching reviews on particular tents, but would be ease of setup. Now, with a larger tent like this, you have to expect that it's going to take more time and there's maybe more complexity or components to it than if you're doing a small, like 2-person tent. So that's something to consider. Then the other thing is all tents, when you look them up to do your research, they're going to tell you how many people fit in the tent. Is it a 2-person tent? Is it a 4-person tent? Is it a 8-person tent? So you get all those numbers. And I guess I understand why they do it, but the manufacturers will look at their space and then they'll say, if I stacked in adults in really narrow places and they're right up next to each other, how many people fit in there? But I don't think that's realistic to what you're probably going to want to do. So this tent, and you'll see inside, well, this tent is advertised as a 4-person tent. And I guess if your shoulder or your arms are touching each other, you could maybe fit 4 adults in here. It would be easier to fit 2 adults and maybe 2 younger children. But keep in mind, if you're eating up your whole floor space with people, then there's no room for equipment or things that you might want to bring into the tent. So I think this tent would be ideal for me. It's for when I'm by myself on a solo trip. It's a Palace, and one more person, if I had a partner coming with me on a trip, and that would maybe cover about half the tent, and there'd still be room to put a couple of chairs or to put a significant amount of gear over on the other side of the tent. You could also do a couple with 1 child and probably still have room to put some gear in. But when you get beyond that, I would look for a larger tent. I also own a 2-person tent, and the reason for that is when I have friends coming, or my daughter or boyfriend sometimes will come out on a trip with me, I'll have a second tent so that we can do that. And this particular tent, just to give you some numbers, I got this tent on sale last December, and there are, as I think I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of sales going on then. And this thing was maybe 20 or 30% cheaper than what it would normally be priced for. And with the tent and with the ground cloth, and then it comes with 2 poles, but I added 2 more. So buying 2 additional poles, I think it was about $350, which is really a super deal for a tent that has this kind of features. But when you're just starting out, again, beg, borrow, don't steal, beg or borrow to get a tent just to kind of check out and see if you like camping. But if you do have to buy one at the beginning, like I'll just give you some examples. I was in Costco last week and they had a tent even bigger than mine. I think it said 6-person tent, and it was like $89 before tax. I've seen on the shelves at Walmart starter 2 to 4-person tents as inexpensive as like $40. So you could really, if you do end up buying one, you can get one pretty inexpensive. And then use that for a while, and then over time, if you decide you want to move up to a more of a full-on tent, you can do that. Now, another spec that goes along with tents is how many seasons is it? The coolest level, the temperature-wise, having a tent that's really good for summer, you're going to see a tent that has a lot of mesh and maybe just a really small rain fly over the top, but not a fully extending one for that. And then you move up to like 3-season tents, and a 3-season tent is supposed to take you through spring, summer, and fall. And so it should have enough mesh to make you comfortable in the summer, but it has enough protection with the rain fly and all of that, so it'll take you down to cooler temperatures, maybe in like the 30s at night, that sort of thing. But to move to a 4-season tent, here we're talking about really cold conditions, and maybe you're in snow and all that. A tent has to have a very good spec to deal with that. Now, this tent is advertised as a 4-season tent. And I think the reason they do that is because the rain fly does come all the way down. And if you can see it down at the bottom here, there's what's called a snow skirt that goes around the outside. And so if it is snowing outside, that skirt helps to keep the snow out from inside the tent. But I would question whether this is a true 4-season tent, because this tent has a lot of mesh. It has windows on the sides, on the back. There's a lot of mesh on the front here. And I haven't shown you from the inside yet, but the top is almost completely mesh on this tent. So if cold air gets through the tarp, and it most likely will, there's not like an inner layer of protection against the really cold air that could be coming in. So I would probably call this a 3+ season tent. Another feature that's available with some tents or advertised, this one advertises that it's like blocks out like 99% of UV rays. UV protection, I guess that's great. Nobody wants skin cancer. But how long are you going to be hanging out in your tent while it's bright sun outside? You're going to probably be out doing activities. So I'm not sure that's a huge thing. But another feature that this one has, the rainfly on this tent actually comes with like a 4-layer system, and they call it a blackout technology. And what that does is, and I've tried it, but in the morning when you're waking up, if you're completely sealed inside of that material, it really blocks out the brightness of the sun. So if you're one of those sleepers that don't want to wake up right at sunrise, and you're sensitive to waking up with the light, blackout technology is kind of a cool thing to have for a tent. So something to look for. After you get the raid fly over the top of the tent, the next step is to bring the tent out away from the inner tent. And the way you do that is with this cord. These are called guy lines, and you bring it out and then you stake them down out further. Now, when I'm doing guy lines, and again, there's 4 here on this tent, and it has a nice loop and a reinforced area there that does it. But I like to pull it on an angle so it's stretching out equally on both the front side and on the side here, which is usually at an angle where it's equidistant angle-wise in both directions there for that. And then because if you were bringing it more straight out in this direction, now you don't have any tautness here along the side, and so it doesn't pull as tight. Now when you do bring it out, of course, that's going to be dictated by how much room do you have, and in tent sites, when you're fitting it in, you don't always have a really wide area to do that. But if there is, as there is in this one, I would bring it out, and if you have enough line, bring it out on a pretty gradual angle so that it's not pulling like down from a tight angle on the whole thing. And then when you put your stake in the ground, angle it away from the guy line in the tent. And what that does is when it angles back and then the line is coming out, it gives like kind of maximum resistance against that tent stake coming out of the ground. If you can imagine it being straight up and then the guy line coming out like that, that's actually creating a force that can pull the stake up out of the ground. So as you can see here, the inner tent, try to create the angle there for you. The inner tent is away from the walls of the tarp. That's what the guy lines are doing on the tarp. And what that does is, if it rains, the tarp will gather moisture. If moisture does eventually start to work its way through a little bit, you don't want the inner tent touching it, because then the moisture will transfer to the inner tent. And that also, by having this gap all around the tent, creates a ventilation path. So air and breeze come inside and along there, and then that'll help to create some ventilation to keep your temperature right. So whenever you go in and out of the tent, you want to zip it back up when you're finished, because you don't want any bugs or critters coming inside the tent. But why don't we pop inside and show you the inside of the tent. As I mentioned, this tent is about 7.5 feet deep and about 8.5 feet across. So there's pretty good space in here. Now, I also, as you can see here, the windows zip down from the inside, and then they have like a little pocket that you can tuck the fabric into. So that way, during the day, you can get some ventilation inside the tent so that it's not totally enclosed. And then it has a few other features. It has a couple of pockets there to put things in. Up here along the ceiling are 2 of these hooks for hanging lights or a fan. And so those are nice features. Another thing is, I don't know if you can see the seams up here, but all tents come together at seams. They're stitched. And And it's very important that the manufacturer seal that stitching so that you don't get any kind of rain or moisture coming in through the seam. So they need to do a seam sealer on there. But most tents come with the waterproofing. So if it says waterproof, it should be. Although you should watch some reviews that cover your tent where somebody has gone out into rain and confirmed that, at least in their case, there was no moisture or rain coming in. In the bottom area of the tent, I don't know if you can see very well, but the fabric changes in color there, and there's a seam along there. And the bottom area is actually called the tub of the tent. Looks like it's about 6 or 7 inches tall, and that's really a nice feature for keeping moisture out because there's no seams below that 7-inch high area. The other thing is a lot of the manufacturers will make the tub area a thicker material than you would have on the walls. And in this case, the bottom is 300D versus it's 210D on the sidewalls. So that's a really nice feature to have as well. In addition to this tent, I actually own one other tent, which is smaller. It's like a 2-person tent. And I got that for when I travel with my oldest child. If she comes out with her boyfriend and we're traveling for the weekend, then I want to have a second tent for that sort of a thing. And the reason I went to a smaller one for the second one is because as you're adding tents into the site, it starts to maybe become complicated. A lot of sites are not big enough to handle more than one good sized tent, or sometimes medium size and a smaller one. So I selected it mainly for that reason. So think about all the specs that I've been talking about, how many seasons or what size tent that you want to get. And then you can start to do your research and narrow it down to the one that's going to be right for you. And of course, as I mentioned, you want to look at product reviews online to get interesting information from different people, especially when it comes to their experience with how waterproof it was, or the seam seal well for that, no loose threads, those types of things are real big pluses that should lean you toward the particular tent. In the next episode, we'll talk about what you need to sleep comfortably in your tent. And if you're enjoying this series, please press the like button. That helps with the algorithms and that sort of thing. And please consider subscribing so that you can get notifications for future and upcoming episodes that I'll be doing. And also, please feel free to make comments below, and we can keep discussions going on different topics that I've been talking about. And I'll see you on the next one.